So every one of our national park, battlefields, and historic sites are going to have special events in honor of America 250. And I even think we're going to have a UFC fight. Does anybody watch UFC, the Great Day in the World? We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this, on the grounds of the White House. We're going to have a UFC fight, championship fight, full fight, like 20, 25,000 people. And we're going to do that as part of 250 also. We're going to have some incredible events, some professional events, some amateur events. But the UFC fight's going to be a big deal.
All right. President Promoter-in-Chief there, Donald Trump, talking about the possibility of a UFC fight at the White House. James Mennie from the Montreal Gazette joins me now. And James, you want to talk about how this Independence Day is feeling a little different for Canadians?
Well, absolutely. I think it's an Independence Day for ourselves. I think a lot of people, I mean, you know, we've heard from callers on the show as well about this whole, you know, sort of controversy, he said, making air quotes, around the Ottawa City Hall hauling up the stars and stripes for July 4th. But yeah, listen, you know, the clip we've just heard, Matt, I'm very sorry. Anybody else, any other, you know, president, and indeed perhaps even future president, they would have gone halfway through. They've been wrestled off the stage and fitted for a jacket that does up the back. But the fact is, it's Donald Trump. And I guess between now and the next July 4th, which will indeed be the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, we may have pole dancers in what used to be the Rose Garden. You never know. But this is where we are. And this is what the U.S. is. And I think a lot of Canadians, I mean, it's sort of been a national tradition as far as I've been alive, that, you know, we sort of shrug and you know, say, well, listen, you know, thank God we're not Americans. And I think now, though, there's a real sense beyond sort of some innate snobbery. There is a real sense of relief that despite the fact that, you know, people will say, no, we're part of the U.S. No, we're not part of the U.S. Although I got to tell you, Matt, when you come right down to it, when you look at the entire sort of like trade tariff issue, if Donald Trump wanted to bring Canada to its knees, indeed probably annex this country, all he would have to do is drop an embargo on all streaming content coming from the U.S. into Canada, i.e., whether it's Netflix or Paramount or Apple TV. Get rid of that, and this country will probably come to a standstill. But he won't, and this is the interesting kind of political ecology we have now in North America. He won't, because the tech bros and the tech giants who share ownership of Donald Trump, along with the Russians and God knows how many other special interests, would never allow that much of their budget, you know, to go out the window, or that much of their revenue to go out the window, just to assuage his ego. But the fact is, this is where we are, and you can't look at this particular 4th of July as being, you know, a 4th of July comme les autres, as we say in these parts. I think you're going to see a real no matter what happens as well with negotiations with the U.S., I think you're going to see a real hardening of attitudes. And don't be surprised even if we do get a deal. Don't be surprised even if we do get a deal that is to our advantage, however unlikely that possibility may be. Don't think Canadians are going to start streaming back to the U.S. I think something has very fundamentally changed in this country's character in the past 7 months, and it's not going to change back very quickly.
What did you make of that decision from Ottawa City Hall to raise the American flag? We had that open call segment a little while ago where a lot of people were pretty upset about it. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. You know what? I think read the room. Like I can understand. Well, you know, it's been a tradition. You know, well, you know what? Due process was a tradition in the U.S. You know, not having mass thugs rounding up and arresting people on suspicion of being brown. You know, this whole idea of what the United States has become, and I'm very, very sorry. You can't say, oh no, but in the past it was. Who cares what the past was? We're looking at right the here and now, and you look what's happening across the border, and it's not exaggerating to say that the U.S. seems hell bent and marching eyes wide open into a very authoritarian form of government. And no, this is not a coup. I think the biggest effect Donald Trump has had on American politics, on American society, is he has allowed the majority of Americans to be able finally to say the quiet part out loud that they've been keeping to themselves for decades. But I think that when you see a narrow-minded, xenophobic, bigoted, greedy, egotistical Donald Trump, I think that's a reflection to a certain extent of the American character in the 21st century.
All right, let's switch gears away from America, let them have their celebrations, and let's talk about some stuff that's going on here in Montreal and in Quebec. You flagged that language complaints to the OQLF are up.
Well, absolutely, not just up. They've tripled in over the past decade. And I think it's great. My hat's off to Andy Riga of the Montreal Gazette, who keeps getting these numbers and making them public. And he's also the guy who broke the story for the infamous use of the word "go" by the STM on its buses for the during the Habs playoff series. But yeah, the past fiscal year, there were more than 10,000 complaints filed with the OQLF. Of course, the apparatchiks who work at the language agency will turn around and say, "Well, it goes to show that our regulations are working and people are paying attention." Actually, it goes to show that the same 100 people who were, filing, perhaps dozens of complaints in the past, really put their shoulders to the grindstone and decided to post hundreds of complaints. And the good news, of course, for all real protectors of the identity and the linguistic purity of the Quebec nation, is that beginning now, thanks to Bill 96, anonymous snitches can just call up the OQLF and have an investigation launched. In other words, if you're a store owner and you think your competitor across the street is outdoing you in terms of retail performance, well, you can always, make his or her life difficult simply by anonymously calling the OQLF and saying, I understand that they're serving people in English or they're not speaking enough French. That's where we are. So, yeah, it's my hat's off to the local government. My hat's off to the OQLF. And really, it's great to see that in the same week we're sort of looking at our entire economy kind of becoming increasingly wobbly as we're looking at a growing amount of uncertainty over which way this province is going to go in the next 12 months. You can make sure that it's becoming less and less likely that if you walk into a store in Montreal, you'll be insulted by the use of the expression bonjour, hi.
All right, Jim, thanks very much for this. Really appreciate your time. Have a great weekend.
You too.